Lake Superior during a severe storm last night, and so far, no survivors have been found.
The SS Edmund Fitzgerald sank into the cold, unforgiving depths of Lake Superior under mysterious conditions in 1975, leaving behind nothing but questions. And 29 missing crew members for over 4 decades, their bodies have never been recovered, and the exact cause of the ship's tragic end remains one of the Great Lakes' most haunting mysteries. But now, after 46 long years, something has finally surfaced. Something that could bring closure to one of the greatest maritime mysteries in history. Could the remains of the crew at last be found? Keep watching to discover what we've unearthed from the depths of Lake Superior. What was the SS Edmund Fitzgerald? The SS Edmund Fitzgerald was a massive lake freighter, first ordered in 1957 and built by the Great Lakes Engineering Works. It was initially powered by a coal-fired steam turbine. Though it was later converted to oil fuel in a 1972 refit, Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance Company of Milwaukee funded the construction, as they saw the vessel as a key investment in the region's booming iron and minerals industries. Designed with a specific goal in mind, the Fitzgerald was constructed to be just under the maximum allowable length for passage through the St. Lawrence Seaway. As a result, it had a hull that stretched 729 feet and a deadweight capacity of 26,000 long tons, making it the longest ship on the Great Lakes when it was launched in 1958. Because of this impressive size, it earned the nickname Queen of the Lakes, a title it held until September 1959, when the 730-foot SS Murray Bay took over. The Fitzgerald was launched on June 7, 1958, and began what was hoped to be a long and prosperous career transporting taconite iron ore across the Great Lakes, a vital task in the region's industrial supply chain. To better understand the SS Edmund Fitzgerald story, it's important to know a bit about its environment. The Great Lakes, these freshwater lakes, also called the Laurentian Great Lakes, straddle the U.S.-Canada border and cover states like Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, New York, and Minnesota. The 5 lakes Superior, Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario together form the largest group of freshwater lakes in the world by area. Remarkably, they hold about 21% of the world's surface freshwater. Despite being lakes, these bodies of water can feel more like seas due to their size and the hazards they present. Weather on the Great Lakes can change rapidly, sometimes without warning, with waves and swells that are deep and close together, creating dangerous conditions for ships. The lakes are also prone to seiches, which are standing waves that oscillate in the water, affecting vessel stability and drafts in shallower areas, especially near docks. Winter adds to the challenges with icing over large parts of the lakes, particularly in areas where pack ice forms, posing additional threats to navigation. All these factors combine to make the Great Lakes a highly challenging environment for ships like the Edmund Fitzgerald, even with modern technology and experienced crews. In late fall, which is when the ship left, the surface of the Great Lakes stays relatively warm, which sets the stage for some of the most dangerous weather conditions on the water. When cold Arctic air sweeps down from Canada and clashes with the warmer air above the lake, massive low-pressure systems form. This creates fierce winds that churn the lake, leading to chaotic, jagged waves, sometimes even rogue waves. A rogue wave is one that stands out by being at least twice the size of the surrounding waves. These giants form when currents and winds combine several waves into one powerful surge. The force they exert is far greater than what even the sturdiest lake freighter can handle. Rogue waves can show up on radar like solid objects, making them nearly impossible to escape. Despite our understanding of how they form, predicting them remains beyond our capabilities. They often appear without warning in areas where they shouldn't even exist. Sometimes they come as a set of 3, known as the Three Sisters. The winds that fuel these deadly waves have earned a nickname among sailors, the Witch of November. So, some could say the odds were stacked against the ship from the very start. The SS Edmund Fitzgerald's final voyage. The SS Edmund Fitzgerald left Superior, Wisconsin on the afternoon of November 9, 1975, under the command of Captain Ernest M. McSorley. It was carrying 26,116 long tons of taconite ore pellets headed for the steel mill on Zug Island near Detroit. Shortly after departing, the Fitzgerald reached its full speed of about 16 miles per hour and later joined another freighter, the Arthur M. Anderson, captained by Jesse B. Cooper, as both ships traveled down Lake Superior. The weather forecast, typical for November, called for a storm to pass just south of Lake Superior by the next morning. Meanwhile, Captain Dudley Paquette of another ship, the Wilfred Sykes, predicted a more severe storm directly crossing Lake Superior. Paquette chose a route that hugged the north shore of the lake, seeking shelter from the storm, while the Fitzgerald and Anderson continued along the regular route. By evening, the National Weather Service upgraded its forecast, issuing gale warnings for the entire lake. By 1:00 a.m. on November 10th, the Fitzgerald encountered strong winds and 10-foot-high waves. McSorley reduced speed due to the worsening conditions and, in a conversation with Captain Paquette, admitted that he was struggling to keep pace. Early that morning, the NWS upgraded its warnings again, this time predicting storm-force winds. The Fitzgerald, originally following the Anderson, began pulling ahead as the storm intensified. By the afternoon, conditions worsened significantly, with winds exceeding 50 knots and visibility dropping due to heavy snow. At around 3:30 p.m., McSorley radioed the Anderson to report that the Fitzgerald was taking on water, had lost some equipment, and was listing. McSorley decided to slow the ship to allow the Anderson to catch up and provide radar guidance. As the Fitzgerald's radar had failed, the crew of the Anderson kept track of the Fitzgerald, guiding it toward Whitefish Bay, a safer area. However, the navigation lights and radio beacon at Whitefish Point were out, adding to the difficulties. By late afternoon, the storm had escalated further. With winds over 50 knots and waves up to 25 feet, the Anderson itself was hit by gusts up to 75 knots and rogue waves as high as 35 feet. Despite the harrowing conditions, McSorley's last radio message at 7:10 p.m. assured the Anderson that they were holding their own. Just 10 minutes later, the Anderson lost radio contact and radar detection of the Fitzgerald. The ship had vanished without sending a distress signal. The sinking didn't just show the dangers of the sea, it also showed how strong the human spirit is when facing nature's biggest challenges. In the cold, deep waters, temperatures drop close to freezing, especially in its deepest areas. This happens because the lake is so big that it takes a long time to warm up, even in the summer. Far below, where sunlight can't reach, the water stays cold all year round. These extreme temperatures are dangerous for both people and the creatures living in the lake. People exposed to the cold water can quickly suffer from hypothermia, making it almost impossible to survive if they stay in the water for too long. The powerful storms that hit, combined with its great depth, make it very difficult to carry out recovery missions. When the wreck was found, it was thanks to sonar technology, but the cold and the depth made it very hard to recover any bodies or investigate the accident further. The dark, icy waters are dangerous for divers, and even advanced underwater vehicles struggle with the intense pressure at such depths. But the challenges don't stop there. Its huge size and depth also mean that it takes almost 200 years for all the water in the lake to fully cycle through. The slow movement affects how nutrients and pollutants spread, often leaving the deeper waters isolated from what happens at the surface. The cold, heavy water at the bottom stays separate from the warmer water near the top, creating layers that don't mix easily. The deep waters hint at many mysteries, including hidden features and possibly unknown creatures living in its murky depths. This massive lake has also played a big role in human history, serving as an important route for centuries. Native Americans were the first to travel its waters, followed by European explorers, and later it became a busy path for commercial shipping. Experts think that the violent sinking, worsened by a powerful storm, might have trapped the crew inside the ship. Evidence suggests that the front of the ship was deeply buried in the lake's bottom, which points to a hard impact that likely blocked any escape routes. Another theory is that the crew, weakened by the freezing cold, was swept away by the strong currents, with their bodies sinking to the bottom and possibly getting tangled in the wreckage. The currents are incredibly strong, sometimes reaching up to 3 knots in certain areas. It's very possible that the crew had no chance of escaping and were pulled away, lost forever in the vast depths. Even with today's advanced technology, it's still extremely difficult to explore the deepest parts, as they are covered in layers of silt and debris, making it nearly impossible to recover remains. And this wasn't the worst part. These depths are also home to countless shipwrecks, each with its own sad story. The ship is just one of many that have met their end in the dangerous waters of the Great Lakes. It's a constant reminder of how unpredictable and deadly the lake can be. Perhaps the cold, dark waters hold onto their secrets tightly, refusing to let go of the souls lost in the tragedy. The lake's reputation for being unforgiving and dangerous is well deserved, and its deep waters continue to stir both fascination and sadness. On top of its tragic place in history, the sinking led to important changes in shipping regulations and safety. Investigations and studies followed the disaster, aiming to understand what went wrong and prevent future tragedies, shaping the way maritime safety is handled today. The search. On the evening of November 10, 1975, after the SS Edmund Fitzgerald disappeared from radar and communication was lost, Captain Cooper of the Arthur M. Anderson quickly contacted the U.S. Coast Guard, USCG, at Sault Ste. Marie. He first attempted to reach them at 7:39 p.m. on the designated distress channel, but due to communication issues, including storm-damaged antennas, the USCG requested he switch to Channel 12. Despite this, Cooper continued struggling to reach them and was not able to effectively communicate until 7:54 p.m., when he was unexpectedly asked to keep an eye out for a missing small boat. Concerned about the Edmund Fitzgerald situation, Cooper persisted and reported the freighter missing at 9:03 p.m. Lacking search and rescue vessels that could quickly respond, the USCG asked Arthur M. Anderson to turn around and aid in the search for survivors around 9:00 p.m. Meanwhile, other freighters anchored near Whitefish Bay were also called to assist, including the SS William Clay Ford, which joined the search. Though the SS Hilda Marjan was hampered by the weather, the USCG also sent out a buoy tender, the Woodrush, but it took hours to launch, and a day to arrive in the search area. A search aircraft from Traverse City, Michigan, reached the scene around 10:53 p.m., followed by a helicopter at 1:00 a.m. on November 11th. In addition, Canadian Coast Guard aircraft joined the search, while the Ontario Provincial Police patrolled the Lake Superior shoreline. Although debris, including lifeboats and rafts, were found, none of the 29 crew members aboard the Edmund Fitzgerald were ever recovered. The crew, ranging in age from 20 to 63, were primarily from Ohio and Wisconsin. The wreck was first discovered by a U.S. Navy Lockheed P-3 Orion aircraft piloted by Lieutenant George Connor on November 14, 1975. The aircraft, typically used to detect magnetic anomalies associated with submarines, picked up on the ship's wreckage approximately 15 miles west of Dead Man's Cove, Ontario. Located near the international boundary in Canadian waters, the wreck lay at a depth of 530 feet, a haunting reminder of the ship's tragic final voyage. Just days later, from November 14th to 16, a U.S. Coast Guard side-scan sonar survey revealed 2 large objects resting close together on the lakebed, confirming that the Edmund Fitzgerald had broken apart. In May of 1976, the U.S. Navy used its unmanned submersible, Curve 3, to conduct an underwater survey of the wreck. The submersible found the ship in two large pieces, with the bow section standing upright in the mud and the stern section capsized at a 50-degree angle. Between the two sections, a mass of taconite pellets, part of the ship's cargo, lay scattered across the lake floor, along with debris such as hatch covers and hull plating. 4 years later, in 1980, renowned marine explorer Jean-Michel Cousteau, son of the legendary Jacques Cousteau, conducted the first manned submersible dive to the wreck. His dive team did not draw any final conclusions, but speculated that the ship had broken apart on the surface. But what if this wasn't just another shipwreck? What if something much more dramatic caused the ship's sudden disappearance beneath the waves? A significant expedition took place in 1989, organized by the Michigan Sea Grant Program. The primary goal of this mission was to record 3D video footage of the wreck for museum educational purposes and documentaries. Using advanced technology such as the Mini Rover ROV, equipped with stereoscopic cameras, the team produced hours of video footage. This footage was later used by both the Great Lakes Shipwreck Historical Society and the National Geographic Society in various documentaries. However, even after reviewing the footage, experts could not determine the exact cause of the sinking. On July 4, 1995, a group of adventurers led by Canadian Dr. Joseph McInnes set off on an expedition to find the wreck. Dr. McInnes was well known for his deep-sea explorations, and this journey had been in the works for quite some time. The team used the latest sonar technology and underwater vehicles to track down the ship. After several days of searching, they finally found it. The ship was resting at about 530 feet underwater, roughly 17 miles northwest of Whitefish Bay, Michigan. When the team began exploring the wreck, they came across something unexpected. The crew's bodies were still surprisingly intact, preserved by the cold water. It was a haunting scene. Some crew members were still in their uniforms, seated in the dining area or lying in their bunks, while others were found on the deck. The freezing temperatures and the low oxygen levels at that depth had slowed down the process of decay, keeping the bodies well preserved. This discovery brought a mix of emotions, sadness, respect, and closure. For the families of the crew, who had spent 20 years wondering what happened to their loved ones, this find provided some long-awaited answers. The explorers took great care to document everything they found, making sure not to disturb the bodies out of respect for both the deceased crew and their grieving families. But this wasn't the end of the story. The recovery of the bodies reopened old questions about how the ship had sunk. Investigators started revisiting different theories, like whether the ship's structure had failed or if a massive wave had caused the disaster. As the news spread, public interest grew once again. Documentaries, books, and articles were produced, offering fresh perspectives on the ship's tragic end. The discovery made headlines in newspapers, magazines, and TV stations across the country. For the families who had been waiting for answers for 2 decades, seeing the ship and their loved ones gave them a sense of peace. Finally, they knew where their relatives were, and it brought some closure. This find also reminded everyone of the risks that sailors take when navigating the Great Lakes, leading to renewed calls for better safety measures and responsibility in the shipping industry. But even then, there was more to take away from this tragedy. Over time, the story became a symbol of remembrance. It was not just about the shipwreck. It became a lasting tribute to those who lost their lives at sea, ensuring their legacy would never be forgotten. The story has become part of popular culture, inspiring many books, documentaries, and movies. When Joseph McInnes and his team of explorers discovered the wreck, they found a haunting scene. The cold water of the lake slows down the decay of anything that sinks, which means bodies that end up on the lakebed could stay there for a very long time, never floating to the surface. In warmer waters, bodies often rise due to the gases that form. But in Lake Superior, the cold keeps them submerged, weighed down by their water-soaked clothing. The storm that sank the ship was massive, with waves as tall as 35 feet. If any remains had floated up, they were likely pulled back down by the lake, disappearing forever into its depths. Tragedy and tribute. In recent years, there have been efforts to remember and honor the Edmund Fitzgerald and its crew. A monument stands in Whitefish Bay, Michigan, and every year a ceremony is held there to remember the lost sailors. The event includes laying wreaths and a moment of silence to honor those who died. The story of the ship has also been kept alive in cultural works, like the song The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald by Gordon Lightfoot. The song tells a sorrowful story of the crew and their families and has become a famous piece of Canadian folk music. Additionally, many books and documentaries have examined the tragedy, offering detailed views on what happened and its aftermath. These works highlight the importance of understanding how dangerous the sea can be. The loss of the ship's crew remains a sad and mysterious chapter in history. No bodies were ever found, and the terrible storm and the strong currents in the lake have turned this event into a lasting tragedy surrounded by uncertainty. The deep waters of Lake Superior hold on to their secrets, never revealing what really happened to the men of the ship. The sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald remains one of the Great Lakes' greatest mysteries, and while everyone agrees that extreme weather played a major role, the exact cause is still debated. Here are some of the leading theories. Waves and weather hypothesis. In 2005, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the National Weather Service, NWS, ran a computer simulation of the weather conditions leading up to the sinking. The simulation showed two areas of high-speed wind over Lake Superior, with one reaching over 49 miles per hour and the other over 46 miles per hour. By 7 o'clock p.m. on November 10th, waves in the area averaged about 19 feet, with some reaching up to 46 feet, which would have caused the Edmund Fitzgerald to roll heavily in the water. Wind speeds of nearly 70 miles per hour, with gusts up to 86 miles per hour, were recorded around the time the ship sank. Such severe conditions could easily have overwhelmed the vessel, leading to its demise, rogue wave hypothesis. Another theory involves the Three Sisters phenomenon, rogue waves known to occur on Lake Superior. These waves are one-third larger than regular waves, and they come in sets of three. The first wave floods the deck, the second adds more water, and the third overloads the deck, potentially flooding the ship. Captain Cooper of the Arthur M. Anderson reported encountering two waves around 35 feet high, which buried parts of his ship and damaged a lifeboat. He believed that these waves, or a third one that followed, likely struck the Edmund Fitzgerald just before it went down. The sheer force of these rogue waves could have been enough to break the ship apart or cause it to take on more water than it could handle. Cargo hold flooding hypothesis. One of the most discussed theories is that water entered the ship through the cargo holds. The U.S. Coast Guard Marine Casualty Report from 1977 suggested that ineffective hatch closures allowed water to gradually flood the hold. Video footage from the wreck shows that most of the hatch clamps were intact, but the few that were damaged may not have been properly secured. Over time, this gradual flooding could have caused the ship to lose buoyancy, leading to a sudden and catastrophic plunge to the bottom of Lake Superior shoaling hypothesis. Another hypothesis, supported by the Lake Carriers Association, posits that the Edmund Fitzgerald ran aground on an uncharted shoal near 6 Fathom Shoal, northwest of Caribou Island. A Canadian hydrographic survey discovered that the shoal extended farther east than originally charted, and it's believed that the Edmund Fitzgerald may have unknowingly struck this shoal. Proponents of this theory argue that the damage to the fence rail reported by Captain McSorley could only have been caused by such an impact. However, subsequent searches of the shoal area found no evidence of a recent grounding, structural failure hypothesis. Some believe that the Edmund Fitzgerald's hull may have been structurally compromised. This theory gained traction after reports from former crew members who noted that the ship bent and sprung during storms. The ship's hull was made using welded joints rather than riveted ones, which are more flexible in rough seas. Some experts suggest that the ship's design, which maximized its length to fit through the St. Lawrence Seaway, made the hull more susceptible to stress fractures in the severe conditions it encountered. The ship may have broken apart on the surface, similar to other ore carriers like the Carl D. Bradley and Daniel J. Morrell, both of which split in two during storms. Topside damage hypothesis. The U.S. Coast Guard also considered the possibility of topside damage. It's believed that something may have broken loose from the ship's deck, damaging the vents and fence rail. This could have led to the flooding of the ballast tanks, causing the ship to list. Maritime historian Mark Thompson speculated that Captain McSorley might not have been able to detect the full extent of the damage from the pilot house, allowing water to enter the cargo hold unchecked, ultimately sinking the ship. But this isn't all. There could also have been a number of possible contributing factors that led to the wreck. Contributing factors. The Edmund Fitzgerald set out based on the National Weather Service forecast which predicted that a storm would pass just south of Lake Superior. However, Captain Paquette of the Wilfred Sykes believed otherwise. After following the storm system, he concluded that it would cross over eastern Lake Superior and chose a safer route that provided more protection. The Edmund Fitzgerald and Arthur M. Anderson, however, followed the regular route of the Lake Carriers Association, leading them into the heart of the storm. Later, a 2005 NOAA simulation confirmed that the Edmund Fitzgerald had been in the worst possible location when the storm hit. With wind speeds exceeding 70 miles per hour, the NTSB also noted that the NWS had failed to accurately predict wave heights on November 10th, further compounding the danger. The Edmund Fitzgerald may have also faced risks from outdated navigational charts. The USCG discovered that Canadian navigational charts from 1916 and 1919, which were relied on in 1975, were not accurate. The charts didn't correctly show the position of 6 Fathom Shoal, a dangerous underwater hazard. After the sinking, a Canadian Hydrographic Service survey found that the shoal extended about a mile farther east than was indicated on the charts, suggesting that the ship may have sailed too close to this hidden danger. One major design flaw of the Edmund Fitzgerald was the lack of watertight bulkheads in the cargo hold. Without these divisions, water could flood the entire cargo hold, quickly destabilizing the vessel. Maritime expert Frederick Stonehouse pointed out that if the ship had watertight bulkheads, it might have survived long enough to reach Whitefish Bay, or allowed the crew to abandon ship safely. The NTSB investigation after the disaster concluded that Great Lakes freighters should be required to have watertight bulkheads, but regulations were delayed due to industry pressure. The Edmund Fitzgerald also lacked important instruments such as a fathometer, which could have helped measure water depth. Without it, the crew had to rely on a handline, an old-fashioned method that was not practical in the stormy conditions. This lack of equipment made the ship more reliant on the Arthur M. Anderson for navigation. Additionally, there was no system on board to monitor water levels in the cargo hold, which could have alerted the crew to flooding before it became critical. Changes to the Edmund Fitzgerald's load line over the years also contributed to the sinking. The USCG had approved several increases in the load line, which reduced the ship's freeboard, which is the height between the waterline and the deck. This meant that during the storm, with 35-foot waves battering the ship, the deck was only 5 feet above the water, increasing the likelihood that waves would wash over the deck. Additionally, concerns about the ship's structural integrity, particularly its keel welds, surfaced after these load line increases. The ship's increased weight may have compromised its stability in such extreme conditions. Maintenance issues also played a role in the tragedy. Some crew members testified that the ship's hull was held together by patching plates and that necessary repairs had been delayed. The NTSB also found that grounding incidents during previous voyages may have caused structural damage that wasn't detected or repaired in time. Captain McSorley, who was known for braving harsh weather, reportedly felt uneasy about the ship's performance, even describing it as a wiggling thing during storms. This combination of maintenance problems and complacency likely contributed to the ship's final disaster. Some theories also suggest that the Edmund Fitzgerald may have broken apart due to the storm's massive waves. Some former crew members reported that the ship bent and flexed during heavy seas, which may have weakened its structure over time. Additionally, the use of welded joints, rather than the more flexible riveted joints, may have made the hull more susceptible to stress fractures. This theory posits that the ship could have broken apart on the surface before it sank. Another hypothesis suggests that the topside damage reported by Captain McSorley at 3:30 p.m. on November 10th could have been more severe than initially believed. A heavy object, such as a log, may have damaged the vents and fence rail, allowing water to flood the ballast tanks. This would explain why the ship began listing, and it may have contributed to the eventual flooding of the cargo hold. All right, so that's it for this video, and if you want to watch more